Okay, good afternoon. Lunch wrap time. Josh is here. Yes. And the the gang here. I was in the high school this morning, and one of the students said, could you tell us about the book of Esther? So I said, yeah, I can. So as I was explaining the book, I kind of realized that this is really a good message, actually. So I think I'll do that now and then maybe even tonight. I'm not sure. But there's some very good points in the book that would be good for our learning. So yeah, I think you can follow it with me. How many of you know the book? Like if somebody were to ask you, you could explain the book to somebody. Just raise your hand. Okay, you know. Okay, all right. So the context, historical and geographically, is that the Jews had been taken into captivity by the Babylonians, and in time the Persians conquered the Babylonian Empire, which lasted 70 years. And so then the new king, Cyrus, Persian king, said the Jews can go back home. Many of them did. I mean, 3%, I think, which is actually a small number. But they go back. But then there are many that having been in Babylon for 70 years or so, then the families get assimilated into the culture and part of the Persian Empire. So the Persian Empire is a dominant world empire, and the king at the time of Esther is Ahasuerus, and he's like many kings. He has his court, he has his counselors, he has his advisors. He has a party for, was it 180 days, showing off the wealth and the affluence and the authority and the power of his kingdom. So then there's a falling out with his wife, and then he has an advisor who's an evil man. His name is Haman, who comes into he is sharing in the king's court, and he has authority there. He's a right-hand man for the king, and he has an idea. He's an anti-Semite. He's against the Jews, and he has the idea of a genocide, killing all the Jews, which is pretty remarkable that thought would come into your head and you would want to get rid of all these people that are spread throughout the empire, the Jewish people. And so the story revolves around this, that the evil guy, Haman, who wants to do this, is the king's counselor, and the king is, in a sense, like we could say maybe at the best, he's passive. Worst, he's like part of the evil conspiracy to murder a whole group of people whose laws are different from the laws of the Persians. That was Haman's argument. But it was more than that. It was hatred. And also the payment for it would be done by Haman, which was an enormous amount of money. So you have a king who should really be leading and filtering through the ideas, and he accepts and tolerates an evil idea. There's an evil motivation and an evil idea of murdering a whole class of people in the kingdom. So we could call that the sleeper, the king that is the sleeper. He's letting it go. He's not awake. He doesn't realize what he's doing. He's part of it by default. We don't really know why he's allowing that to happen. It's not explained. But just the idea that there isn't any explanation leads me to think that these things can happen and we're not really in the game. We're not engaged. We don't really have a filter. We're just letting it go. Maybe I'm wealthy, lazy, maybe I'm drunk, maybe I'm indifferent, and also I don't have a wife, by the way. Like we don't. I don't actually know the timing on it, but anyway, we know that he had gotten rid of his wife, and now there's a search for a new one, and that's Esther, and Esther is Jewish, and so she comes into the, royalty. She becomes the queen, and it's her uncle, Mordecai, who is awake. So we have two things. We have one guy that's a sleeper. He's the king. There's evil present, and then there's Mordecai, who is awake. And that's what I feel is happening in our country too. Like we have sleepers, and then we have people that are awake. Huh? I hadn't really thought of that, but I won't say that from the pulpit. All right, so what does it mean? It means that there is a government, there is a lot of authority, there is an evil agenda, and somebody's not really realizing what is happening. But God is here, God is present, and God has people like Mordecai. And God has planted Esther into that place to be the queen. And she has to get in the game. And when it comes to that point, like she's tempted not to get into the game. And her uncle says, no, you're a Jew. And you think you're going to escape this? And, if you don't do this, somebody else will. But somebody's got to do it. So that's the storyline. That's basically what's going on. And the thing that I am drawn to in the story is simply how evil can happen because of indifference and some blindness, and maybe, what could I use another word other than sleepy? Into apathy, indifference, like ignorance, blindness, I'm in a bubble. And it looks like that king, because he was kind of gloating in his empire and gloating in his, that can blind me to like my responsibility. Like, what's my responsibility? Your responsibility is to govern and lead, I read an editorial by Charles Krauthammer that was interesting about the arc of history. And he said that there are leaders that just are not engaged because they believe that the arc of history will tend to justice. That if I don't do anything, that sooner or later, the arc will go to justice. But that, in his editorial, he's saying that is like a terrible way of governing. That means I can check out and be fatalistic and just assume that Nazi Germany, that somehow, justice will prevail. But meanwhile, millions of people suffer. I mean, okay, maybe something like actually, Mordecai did say that if you don't do something, somebody will. But that doesn't mean that you can check out. Esther, you are here because God put you here, and not to be indifferent, but to be engaged. So that's what's needed. And if you perish, you perish. She said that. If I perish, I perish. So, all right. So, that's our lunch devotional. Our lunch words today. And I think, well, let's say something about being apathetic and something about being energized. The energizing that's needed in our world is spiritual, and to be awake unto God, and Jesus saying, I must do my Father's will, John 5:19. I always do what pleases my Father. And for Jesus to be here showing us, and if you follow me, I will make you a fisher of men. If you follow me, you'll be awake. You'll be engaged. That's a good word. You have something to say. You have some conviction about it. You're alive and awake. And I think in our country right now, like churches and believers need to be awake to, like, what's happening, awake to moral issues, awake to what's going on, because in our life there is the possibility that Haman is getting his way. Now, in the story, there is one detail that's fascinating, and it is that he had to decide what day this purging will happen, what day we will all go after the Jews and slaughter them. Remember? And he had to pull a calendar date out of a basket or whatever, pull a lot. Lots, Purim it's called, right? Lots, like just a random pull. So it was a late date, the 11th month or something. It was like they had a long time before that day would come. So that was like an act of God, so that the people could get ready, or this would be known throughout the empire. And then when Esther woke up the king, and the king said, well, what do? We sent out then she said, why don't you make another law? And that is that the Jews have a right to defend themselves. And he said, great, then everybody will be waking up. Like, in other words, the government won't protect you this way, but they'll give you a right to fight. They give you the right to defend yourself. So, and again, a long period of time, that meant that the word would get out by horses and mules and camels, and the communication system was by couriers. So the couriers go from Shushan in Babylon, the Babylonian Iraq, Baghdad area. I think Baghdad is the name for Shushan. So to get out to the borders of India and to go all the way to Egypt would be couriers going all the time. Well, now there needs to be couriers to counter. And now the word had to go throughout the empire that the Jews had a right to defend themselves. And they did. And they also, another little point was that the Jewish people, they did it, but they didn't plunder. They didn't plunder. But Haman's ruling was, kill them and you can take everything that they have. That'll be all yours. You can plunder the thing. And their counter was just to defend themselves, not to plunder, and they didn't. And then there became a huge festival called Purim, where they're just celebrating that they had the victory over their enemies. All right, so the main point I think that I want to make is that here in the United States, we want to know what is going on. We want to be awake. We want Marty K.I. to be our counselor. We want to be awake to the spiritual battle, and we want to get our guns ready. I don't mean that. Okay, I'm a, what do you call that? White nationalist, whatever it's called, with the guns and everything. No, we want to have our spiritual life, our words ready. our convictions ready, our persuasion ready, our schools, our Bible college, our pastors waking up and realizing that we have a battle to fight, and that is against evil, and that we have our blessed country, blessed rights, and we are awake and engaged. All right, so how does that work worldwide for all of us in Greater Grace, wherever? Just, I think all we have to say is that if you sleep, the enemy can walk all over us and we'd wake up and not even realize what happened. But if we're awake and we are outspoken and we vote and we have our rights and we guard them and protect them, and that we are Christians, and that there's something higher than the government, and that's God, and that we are getting our words and our hearts and our lives and our love that comes from God, then we will overcome what Haman is doing. Because what Haman is doing is without God. The basic contest is no God or God. And if I say no God, I'll formulate our own moral world, our own judgments on things, and it gets real controlling, and that the state is God. If you don't have God, you have the state as God. It's historical, it's a fact. The state is God, and that's how it goes. You got to have some moral law and rules and governance, and if it's not God, then it's the state. And for us, it's God. And the state doesn't like that when they go Haman's way, but that's like God's way, and we go with God, and we find the blessing of God, the Spirit of God, the heart of God, the freedom of God, and the way of God. So that's my word for today. Amen. See you later.